Moses gives us a preface to his handing over the law to the people. And he gives us sort of pointers on the fact that the law is something special. Of course, it's a product of the mind. It's an intellectual thing. It's rational. Our God is one whom we worship without reserve, but it's amazing that the law is something that so much conforms to our lives in a rational way, an intelligent way. That's the great point that he's trying to make here. The people, he says, other people will see us, and we will give them evidence of wisdom and intelligence, and everyone who hears our statutes will say, this great nation is truly a wise and intelligent people. So we have the law as the basis of the identity of the people of Israel. And St. James tells us in the second reading, and I would add that this letter from St. James is really an adaptation of ancient Jewish wisdom as well. And he says that religion that is pure, real religion, he's telling us, the word isn't religion, it's cultus, the devotion to the cult, to the rituals. The pure and undefiled religion before God and the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their affliction. This is a tradition from throughout the prophets, from ancient times. They're constantly harping on the people to care for the orphans and the widows. They have no advocates. They have no one to care for them, no one to look out for them. We have to care for them and all the needy in that sense. So that's what pure religion is. This idea of purity, though, is troublesome, I think. There's a great anthropologist by the name of Mary Douglas. She was a very devout Catholic, and she wrote many great books, really. And one of her books is called Purity and Danger. It's an interesting juxtaposition. We would think purity and impurity or something like that. Purity and defilement or some such. But she points out that the whole idea of purity has to do with avoiding the danger of the impure. And what is the impure? It is any material that's not in its proper place. So say you're doing some gardening and you're digging up the rich Nebraska soil and planting in it. And say you get some of that soil on the sidewalk. Well, immediately that soil is dirt. It's something that doesn't belong where it is. No big deal, but the idea of something being in the wrong place is what really comes down to the dangers in our lives. So there's kind of a motto that certainly the ancient peoples would have recognized, and some people today would see it. We say, a place for everything, and everything in its place. And that guides the law. So we have unclean animals, for example, pigs. Why are pigs unclean? Well, animals with hooves don't chew their cud. The animals with toes, like cows, they chew cud, and there's all kinds of other animals that do as well. But there's no hoofed animal that chews its cud. And by the same token, there's no toed animal, we're speaking of livestock here, not two-footed animals, but no animal with toes doesn't chew cud. So a pig is out of place. There's something wrong. It's a crossover. It's not pure. So it's unclean, so to speak. Now this idea of cleanliness, and as the gospel talks about it, the Pharisees, and in fact all Jews, do not eat without carefully washing their hands. Well, that sounds like pretty good hygiene. But as Mark continues, he says, keeping the tradition of the elders. This is all part of tradition. The idea that washing your hands keeps you clean in a sense that keeps you from getting diseases, that didn't come around until about 160 years ago. No one ever thought of germs and that sort of thing. No one thought of being infected because they had dirty hands. So that has nothing to do with what we're talking about here. It's all a matter of being in its place. So Jesus comes and says, that's not it at all. But he resorts to the prophets, the great tradition here in his argument. He cites Isaiah prophesying about you hypocrites. He says, you disregard God's commandment but cling to human tradition. Okay, so that's the basis of his argument. But he goes on and he says, listen, everybody, and understand this. Nothing that enters into you can defile you. Nothing makes you impure that you eat or drink or take into your body. There's a paragraph in the gospel that's missing from this reading where Jesus says, it goes in your mouth, it passes through your body. Alimentary canal is one closed system all the way down, and it passes into the latrine, he says. So it doesn't defile us. It doesn't make us evil. He says it's what comes from within that makes us defiled, that makes us impure. And what kinds of things are those? Well, evil thoughts, unchastity, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, licentiousness, envy, blasphemy, arrogance, folly. It's a classic listing of people's evils. It's a description of our wickedness. We all recognize these things. And Jesus' point, of course, is something along the lines of St. James, our pure practicing of our faith, our pure religion, our pure cultus, depends on changing what comes from within. We have to let out from within, well, the opposite of these things. Love, compassion, generosity, forgiveness. I won't make as long of a list of good things, but there are at least just as many. And so we purify ourselves by living our lives according to Jesus' law.